it is really difficult to implement change. Many of you are here because you are agents of change in your home university. And I would guess there's a certain degree of fatigue and perhaps bruising that sets in as you try to go through this. This is a pogo. We have met the enemy, and he is us. Carefully selected, you'll note, as 1971, so it ties right back into me. That just shows how old I am. If we want to start from scratch, and we were to design a new model, a new way of thinking, we would start by trying to imagine what, in the best of all worlds, would we like to see? What is our vision for a healthy society? And what role does education play in that? And what role do we play as educators in that? And then out of all that massive amount of stuff that we could be doing, we would select an action that would say, this is the piece that we are going to do. This is our step to creating that brilliant worldview that we'd like to see. And these things are embedded in a value and a belief and an ethic. And we would talk about our values and our beliefs and our ethics. And we'd ask about how we might live a life that way. Once we'd done that, we'd say, well, you know what? If we are actually able to take that action, that mission, in the values and beliefs that we hold to be central and dear, we would produce some pretty sweet things. Right? We would have some pretty powerful outcomes. Now, what would those outcomes be? And we imagine that. And then we ask the question, well, if that's what we want to achieve, how could we best do that given the constraints and situations that we find ourselves in? Those are the processes. And in order to make those processes work, what knowledge or tools or structures do I need in order to make all those processes work, right? So that's the kind of thinking pattern that goes on. Now, I did my B.Ed at the University of Regina.
Woo! Yeah.
We're like a nanosecond away from breaking into the Rider theme song.
Yeah.
And at the time that I went there, I went specifically because it was known to be the place to go if you wanted a dynamic education program. Spent 11 years at the University of Lethbridge, and it has the reputation of being the place to go in Alberta. Ask any superintendent, and they'll say they'll hire that program first. And I spent the last 7 years in one of the most wild and wonderful program designs you can possibly imagine. I couldn't explain it for the longest time. I still can't, and that's why I'm not going to talk about it. But it's wild and wonderful, and it's powerful. And the thing that is consistent, even though each of those programs look structurally completely different, they all came about at a time when a new university was created, free from the restrictions of the old way of thinking, and they were able to actually think through this process. And in thinking through this process, free of the structural level, they were able to create something really powerful and interesting. You see, all of the discussion tends to happen around those ideas, around that set of the continuum. But what happens when we try to make change within a system? Well, when we do that, we actually have to come from the bottom up. And we tend to calcify our structures and our processes, and that becomes the starting place for thinking about change. Oh, well, I need 120 credits passed over 4 years, and I've got 3 credit classes, and they have to happen within a semester. So we've got all these rules and structures, and what those things do, inevitably, is limit the thinking about what outcomes we can produce, and they definitely limit that sense of vision making. And we often create a disconnect between those who are passionately committed to and still retain that sense of vision for what things could be, and yet are so burdened and laden down by the rule mechanisms that we put in place within universities. I think that's our number one challenge, is how can we possibly free ourselves from this thinking? The longer you live in it, you all understand habituation as a core psychological process, right? So your perceptual processes are designed to do a number of things, but one of the things they do very, very well is filter out. And I can see about 12 of you have already filtered out audio right now. Because if you were attending to every bit of sensory stimuli that came in, you'd be overwhelmed. And so the brain has to have a way of filtering it out and putting stuff into the background. We call it figure ground, right? Something comes to the figure, something's in the background. People get habituated into thinking structure first, that it's almost impossible to get folks to have an honest discussion about what would life be like if we didn't have these structures and these processes. Well, that's just crazy talk, because we got it. Right? I like to remind folks that the beauty of a bicameral system is that faculty has the right to invent, imagine, and create the agenda of work that sits in front of their students. And administrators have the responsibility that as long as we can do that within the financial picture that we have, it's our job to go figure out, well, how in the world do we enable that? Right? Great idea. How do we enable it?